Good evening, everyone. My name is Brian Steich. I'm the Director of the Environment and Infrastructure Division with the Chester County Planning Commission. And thank you all for attending our meeting tonight, our one and only public meeting for the development of our Complete Streets policy. Before we get started with the program, I'd like to introduce our Chair of Board of Commissioners, Ms. Marian Moskowitz, who would like to provide some opening remarks.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you everyone for joining us. You know, Complete Streets is as much of a social equity issue as it is a transportation issue. The simple addition of sidewalks in communities where no sidewalks exist will expand access to transportation networks for people without cars. Complete Streets promote active transportation or any self-propelled human-powered mode of transportation, such as walking and biking. According to the Centers for Disease Control, physical activity is a major contributor to the steady rise in rates of obesity, diabetes, heart disease, stroke, and other chronic health conditions in the United States. Providing for active transportation facilities, such as sidewalks and bike lanes, will provide more opportunities for physically active travel and lead to healthier communities in Chester County. We do not own any roadways, we only own bridges. So we need buy-in from our municipalities to adopt and implement a Complete Streets policy to ensure that everyone in our communities and the modes by which they travel are accounted for when redeveloping our existing transportation thoroughfares. I'll turn it over to Commissioner Maxwell for a couple of minutes. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Chair. A Complete Streets policy in Chester County will help to advance the Live, Prosper, and Connect goals of Landscapes 3 by encouraging better access to community facilities and services that will lead to a stronger, healthier, and more sustainable communities, and create more efficient transportation systems to serve thriving and growing communities. We know connectivity is going to be so important to the future economic health of our county as we build bridges to connect our downtowns and our park space and all of our preserved park space. And I couldn't be more proud. I know that we couldn't be more proud that the Chester County Planning Commission is making such an important, making this such an important goal of all of our municipalities and our government to achieve. So looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Marian. Thank you, Josh. We'd look forward to having you stick around for much of the program if you're able. I'd like to introduce the Executive Director of the Planning Commission, Mr. Brian O'Leary, who would also like to give some opening remarks. Brian?
Thanks, Brian, and good evening, everyone. Really happy to see that you've joined us tonight. And I just wanted to say very quickly that the County Planning Commission is looking forward to working with all of our municipalities on Complete Streets. This is not really a new topic for us. We've been working to improve alternative modes of transportation for a long time. We did last year send out to all the municipalities an active transportation inventory, and we would be happy to come to your municipality to present and to talk about different transportation modes and what communities can do to encourage walking, biking, and taking public transportation. I also would like to note that invite you really to check out our website, chescoplanning.org. It's got so much good information about different elements of creating a complete streets world where everyone in Chester County can take a variety of different modes of transportation. So thank you, Brian.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. Next slide, Eric. Okay, just for tonight's meeting agenda, we just got through our welcome and introductions. I will be introducing Eric Quinn, who's a transportation planner and our project manager for the Complete Streets policy. Get back on video here, sorry. Eric will be providing the project overview, what are complete streets, and also the guiding principles. We will then stop the program and address any questions that anybody may have relative to what it is going to be factored into the policy. We'll have that for a maximum of 10 minutes. And then in the second part of our program, we will cover the draft policy and framework that we have developed thus far for the complete streets, as well as discuss the next steps of how we're going to move this policy forward and implement it within the county. That will be followed by another session of Q&A as well as discussions. And we plan to be hopefully be able to wrap this up by 8 o'clock. If there is input that the folks out there would like to provide for us beyond that, we're certainly willing to stick around and get the input, because the purpose of this is not only to inform everybody about what we are doing, but also to gather your input towards making this policy as best as it possibly could be. And with that, I will turn this over to Eric Quinn, who will guide us through the first part of our program here.
Okay. Thanks, Brian. Thanks again for joining us tonight. And just real quick, project funding. The funding for this project came from the Pennsylvania Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, and it is being administered by PA Walkworks. So thank you for that. Our project schedule for creating this policy, we had our initial stakeholders meeting in May, followed by an initial developing an initial draft with our second stakeholders policy early or mid-June. Obviously tonight we're having our public meeting, and we're hoping to get plenty of feedback from this meeting so we can start to prepare the draft policy to present to our stakeholders in a third meeting, which is going to be in late July. By the end of August, we're looking to have our final draft policy completed with a goal of having approval by the Chester County Planning Commission Board at their September meeting. This comes from Smart Growth America and the National Complete Streets Coalition, and I'll go ahead and just read this. Complete streets are designed and operated to prioritize safety, comfort, and access to destinations for all people who use the street, especially people who have experienced systemic underinvestment or whose needs have not been met through a traditional transportation approach, including older adults, people living with disabilities, people who cannot afford or do not have access to a car, and Black, Native, and Hispanic or Latino communities. Complete Streets makes it easy to cross the street, walk to shops, jobs, and schools, bicycle to work, and more actively with assistive devices. And move more actively with assistive devices. They allow buses to run on time and make it safe for people who to walk or move actively to and from train stations. So what is a complete street? Well, complete streets are designed to safely and efficiently facilitate multiple modes of transportation, such as pedestrian, cycling, and public transit, not just the automobile. Now here's a before and after example from Smart Growth America of a 4-lane road, and perhaps that road has been underutilized for a number of years. And the idea here is retrofitting the existing road into a facility that is more functional for multiple modes of transportation. Why create a complete streets policy? Well, there's limited right-of-way. The expectation is that our population will continue to grow. It's supposed to be, the projection is to be at about 630,000, which is about a little over 100,000 from where we are now by 2045. But our right-of-ways are finite. So there's only so much room to expand. Can we find more efficient ways to utilize our existing right-of-ways? Transportation infrastructure has aimed, number two, transportation infrastructure has aimed its attention on the movement of cars and trucks. So not everyone has access to an automobile, and there's also an aging community that will continue to increase in numbers and will less likely drive. So bottom line is every citizen has a right to be able to travel safely within the restraints of the existing roadway infrastructure. And number three, active transportation. The CDC recommends the adoption of complete streets policies as a strategy to prevent obesity. While Chester County continues to be one of the healthiest counties in the state, 23% of children between the ages of 6 and 17 are considered overweight or obese. The driving forces, these are the guiding principles here are the driving forces behind the Complete Streets policy. Naturally, the comprehensive plan landscapes 3, and also the 10 elements, which is a list of ideals compiled by the National Complete Streets Coalition. And we'll go ahead and read through these elements here. Number 1, the policy includes a vision, what do complete streets look like in Chester County. Number 2, it specifies all users. Number 3, it applies to new and existing projects, new communities being built, and existing roadways being maintained. It's if it's a new street being built, it seems rather easy to design a complete street, but how do we incorporate a complete street into the existing streets as they are being upgraded or maintained? Number 4, the policy should set clear and specific exceptions. Number 5, connectivity and network connections. Looking at the big picture countywide, can we develop an integrated network that doesn't stop at municipality boundaries? And number 6, it's got to be able to be adoptable by all municipalities. 7, it's written in a manner that encourages new innovation while also having the flexibility to meet the needs for all users. And I love to give the example here of e-scooters. They're not here yet, but they will be. Number 8, context sensitive. It needs to fit the local community. Number 9, performance standards. How do we keep track to see if it's working? And number 10, steps for implementation. Guidance for seeing policy through to municipal ordinances that are carried through. So how do we incorporate a complete streets policy into landscapes 3? Now the goal, the overarching goal here is to add the policy as an addendum to the landscapes 3 comprehensive plan. Refocusing on the big picture, just read through the vision of landscapes 3. In 2045, Chester County abounds with healthy natural areas, robust farms, cherished historic sites, diverse housing, thriving businesses, quality education, accessible transportation, and vibrant communities for all. Now, Landscapes 3 has 6 goal areas for achieving this vision. And the Complete Streets policy will best enhance the live, prosper, and connect goal, which was spoken about already this evening. The live goal, diverse and well-rounded communities, balanced residential opportunities, and convenient access. The prosper goal, economic strength, developing and sustaining a skilled workforce, supporting infrastructure, and a culture of innovative and engaged communities. And of course, connect. Advance efficient, reliable, and innovative transportation, utility, and communication infrastructure systems that responsibly serve thriving and growing communities. Now, if we dig a little deeper into the Connect goal, we'll take a look at the objectives here. Meets the needs to meet travel needs and reduce congestion. Provide universally accessible pedestrian facilities and provide a continuous network. And ensure safe and efficient competitive transport of freight, goods, and people. And if we look at the recommendations, implementation of transportation improvements, advanced multimodal transportation, embrace smart growth, or embrace smart transportation, promote bus service, and create a countywide interconnected network. Taking a look here at the Landscapes 3 policy map, it consists of 6 different landscape types broken down into 2 groups: the growth areas and the rural resource areas. The growth areas being the urban centers, the suburban centers, suburban areas, and the rural centers. And obviously the rural resource areas are rural landscapes and agricultural landscapes. Back to that resource map, or the policy map. How do we envision the future growth of the county? Chester County doesn't own any roads, as was discussed before. The policy has to be written in a manner that will encourage municipalities to want to adopt their own complete streets policy. Can we create a complete streets policy that can be adopted by all municipalities regardless of landscape? And how can complete streets policies be flexible enough to be considered in any of the designated growth areas or rural resource areas? And now we're going to open it up. We'd like to hear your questions. And we're going to stop sharing for a bit. And we're going to open it up for about 10 minutes for questions and discussions.
Stop sharing.
Here we go.
If you have a question, I don't know if you have the ability to raise your hand, if that's one of the functions here, or you can certainly, you can either enter a question into the chat or raise your hand.
Eric has a question. Eric, Mr. Salzer. And you can unmute if you like. There you go.
Hi, that was actually my husband who signed up. So this is Mary Alice Salzer.
Hi, Mary Alice. How are you?
Hey, good. How are you?
Good to see you.
Just got done putting my toddler down. So anyways, a question about bike lane. And maybe it's too early in the presentation to get down to technical questions like that. So you can stop me if I'm a little ahead of that. As far as maintenance, because a lot of times bike lanes, they just end up getting rocks and stuff from the other cars thrown into it, and then they're not very accessible to the bikes, or like people are just using them as shoulders. So I'm curious to how, you know, bike lanes are going to be addressed as far as maintenance or even enforcement of, I don't know, ticketing if people are driving in bike lanes and that kind of thing.
Well, Mary Alice, what we're developing here is a policy, which is an overarching guiding, way of thinking. And I think what you're getting into so far is the maintenance or the maintenance requirements and things will be written into the policy. But I think it's ultimately, what the municipalities that adopt this policy actually implement, so far as what they're able to do. From a public works perspective for maintenance and other, there are things that we'll talk about here in the second half of the presentation relative to what the goals of the policy are going to be. There's essentially going to be, the framework of what's included in the policy with some discussion of those individual components. And there is a portion that does address maintenance. So we will talk about that a bit. But ultimately, I mean, what we're promoting here at this point is really a policy that hopefully most, if not all of the county municipalities adopt, that then translates into other elements of their administration, including, planning documents, actual design, land development review, and or even get into the level of maintenance as you had suggested there. So I hope that answers your question. And you could certainly, we can revisit that after the end of the presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Sure thing.
Thank you. Brian, we've got a couple in the chat. The first one, do you have an initial indication of which communities may be interested in joining this effort, or is it too early? That came from Carl Johnson.
We have a stakeholder committee. The one thing that we've essentially invited a number of municipal managers from a relatively representative cross-section of communities in the county, managers from our boroughs, from our more populated suburban municipalities, some of the more rural municipalities. So we're looking to get a cross-section from all of these municipalities. They have offered, their takes on some of them. There are some questions about it, but we really have not at this point gauged an interest in or their interest in whether or not they'd be willing to adopt a policy. I mean, one of the things that we really need to incorporate is we have to give them a good reason to adopt the policy. So there has to be some sort of, carrot involved in that. And we'll be working with the stakeholder committee to determine what that carrot should be. We do believe that we have interest in this. I can't say, what percentage of municipalities across the county may be interested. I think it's more important, I think, for us to really, have this way of thinking be imparted in mostly in our growth areas, because that's where it's most critical, where you need to, provide the additional space for these other modes of transportation and users of all abilities. But I think that, there are applications for the rural resource areas as well. I mean, I think, I won't to pick on one, let's say West Marlboro, it's a completely all agricultural in our rural resource area. But because of that, it has, relatively low traffic volumes, which is a very attractive place for touring cyclists to cycle. So they do need to provide for some space for, other users beyond just cars and say farm equipment in that type of place. So, again, we're going to touch upon how we're going to promote this later on in the presentation, and hopefully we are able to get many of our municipalities to adopt this.
All right. Thanks, Brian. And let's see, we've got a couple more questions here from Andrew Thompson. Does the Complete Streets policy include complementary land use policies to support complete streets, or is it limited to public right of way? It's a great question.
Yes and no. I mean, it's specifically addressed to the transportation element or the thoroughfare. But yes, the components that you include within those thoroughfares do relate to the adjacent land use. For example, if we're looking at, say, bus service, and will the facilities, if it's a community that just does not have bus service or is not projected to have bus service for any sort of the near or extendedly near future, there are portions of the policy that deal with exceptions, so that we are going to be setting them at a relatively high bar so that you just can't easily dismiss certain modes of transportation. But there are some that just won't be appropriate in certain situations, and that is the nexus with the adjacent land use. So I hope that sort of answers your question, but I think that's really where we're looking to, where we see the appropriateness of certain transportation modes based on location and or landscape type that we have within our comprehensive plan.
And regarding public right of way, can you speak to the idea of how PennDOT Connects works and how municipalities can get involved more with the Connects program?
Yes, the PennDOT Connects program, or its actual policy that was administered by then Secretary Leslie Richards, when shortly after she became the PennDOT secretary. And it's really a great planning program where every project that is on the tip or ends up on the tip has to have an initial meeting with the municipalities through which where that project is located. And they do many of the things. It's not necessarily labeled as complete streets, but they do run through a checklist of, is there well, should there be, for example, if it's a bridge project, should there be sidewalks on the bridge? Are there bike lanes? Is there any cycling activity in the area? And it's not just relative to active transportation, it's well relative to, are there school bus routes, or is there trucking? Is this road, heavily with truck use and things like that? So PennDOT does have that with the Connects policy. I believe it was instituted probably 4 years ago now. And we at the county do participate in a number of those Connects meetings with the municipalities and the local district when these projects initially begin and before they do any design work on the project.
Yeah. And by the way, the Chester County, it was mentioned earlier by the commissioner that Chester County doesn't own any roads. They only own bridges, and facilities has taken on their own sort of PennDOT Connects program in order to work with municipalities early in the projects as well. So Natasha has asked, I think we sort of answered this already. Natasha Manbeck, will the policy relate to the rural resource versus growth areas? Meaning, will there be different approaches for different landscapes? Absolutely. Well, boy, let's not pick on West Marlboro. How about we pick on Warwick? We're not going to see bike lanes probably in Warwick Township, but you might see sharrows, or you might see share the road signs more often. So there's an example of how complete streets can work into these rural resource areas as well.
Okay. Well, I think we're coming up on 10 minutes. I'm just going to take one last look through the Q&A. If we don't address this question now, we can certainly address the questions at the end of the presentation.
Yeah, Mr. Newman discussed the Interstate Highways act as barriers. They sure do. They act just like rivers. And we do have, obviously, we've got the Pennsylvania Turnpike, and we also have other limited access highways that act as barriers. Route 1 down in southern Chester County, 202 heading through the midsection of the county, and even parts of 422 up north.
Mm-hmm.
So.
There's a question from Paula Sava of what is the carrot going to be? For example, adoption of the policy may make you eligible for certain grant opportunities. We have in our county the Vision Partnership Program, and municipalities are only eligible if they endorse and/or accept the Landscapes 3 comprehensive plan to be eligible to receive those funds. So that's an example. I mean, we had received some questions from the municipalities expressing concern of if they did adopt a policy, if it would preclude them from funding opportunities. And which is the reverse of that. If you have a policy, you would not be eligible. We don't see that as really happening in any. I can't imagine a situation where that would occur, but we are working with our committee to address those concerns, to flesh out those issues. And again, we may get other ideas too that would help to have our municipalities adopt such a policy.
All right. I think we should carry on, Brian.
Yeah, let's head into the second half of the show, and you can go ahead and kick it off and get going.
Okay, here we go. We'll start with the policy framework. We've got vision, goal, and principles, applicability, exceptions, design standards, performance measures. The Complete Streets vision: Chester County roadways will meet the needs of all users, including those in underserved communities, and provide for all appropriate modes of transportation with an emphasis on safety, equity, and environmental responsibility. Moving into the goals. Chester County will practice approaching every relevant project as an opportunity to promote and advance the Complete Streets vision, to incorporate all transportation needs for users of all ages and abilities. Projected population growth in Chester County will expand the need for transportation facilities. New transportation facilities will be designed to incorporate various modes of transportation, including but not limited to automotive, pedestrian, bicycling, and public transit. Redevelopment or reconfiguration of existing transportation facilities will best incorporate the Complete Streets vision and increase the various modes of transportation, including but not limited to pedestrian, bicycle, and public transit when existing right-of-way is available. Create and maintain a comprehensive, integrated, connected, safe, convenient transportation network within Chester County that encourages and supports sustainable development. Create transportation designs which establish context-sensitive solutions that fit within the various landscapes defined by the county's comprehensive plan. For new projects or existing maintenance, incorporate outreach and public input from the community to help advocate for safety and mobility for all users. Report results of Complete Streets policy implementation through measurable goals, including but not limited to accident reduction, level of service, transit ridership, and mode shift. And now I'm going to pass this on. I'll stop sharing for a second. I'm going to pass this on to Brian. I think you're muted, Brian.
Okay, can anyone turn my, oh, there we go, sorry. All right, thank you, Eric. Now just relative to the applicability or how this Complete Streets policy would be used by our municipalities. And really it's applicable throughout the municipal transportation and development process. It could be adopted as part of the policy of the municipality's comprehensive plan. It could be used when looking or developing a bicycle and pedestrian mobility plan within existing roadways. It could also, be somewhat related to a trails plan, which are typically off-road plans. But bicycle and pedestrian mobility plans, if municipalities have them, will make them really eligible for some other opportunities, which I'll touch upon in a minute. We also, see that, it depends on, and this is really up to each municipality, how far they want to incorporate the Complete Streets concept into their ordinances, which might include the subdivision and land development ordinances, or even the more stringent zoning ordinances relative to the districts they have planned within their communities. Land development is probably one of the best areas that would have a more immediate impact as developers make their land development proposals. And these proposals are reviewed by municipalities. They could use something as simple as a land development checklist to see if certain transportation modes are applicable and or should be actually incorporated into the roadway design as part of that project. Many of the larger developments have traffic impact studies, which may identify some roadway improvements such as turn lanes and or accel or decel lanes. They could also be used to identify creating missing connections in sidewalks and or side paths or bike trails that are already located in the area that the new developments may help to expand upon. Relative to maintenance and Mary Alice's question earlier, they could be adopted by the municipality's public works department for cleaning roadway shoulders. And sidewalks, for sidewalks maintenance, many of the borough ordinances require existing landowners to maintain sidewalks in front of their homes. But if there should be any new sidewalks that aren't necessarily developed in residential areas or in commercial areas that are wanted by the township or municipality, shall I say, they can enter into agreements with PennDOT if they're located within PennDOT right of ways to have, to develop those sidewalks so long as the municipalities agree to maintain them. Relative to more bicycling opportunities, there are pavement markings and signage. I believe a couple years ago, PennDOT modified its bicycle occupancy permit to limit the amount of maintenance that municipalities would have to do relative to on-road bike facilities such as bike lanes and or shared roadways. Before, it was understood that if you had a bike lane within the roadway, the municipality was required to clean the snow off in the wintertime of that bike lane, which really doesn't make much practical sense because they're part of the roadway. So PennDOT has agreed that they will plow the bike lanes, but the municipalities will ultimately be responsible for the pavement markings, which would be the legends, the bicyclist legends, and or any other, in some cases you see the green paint and or signage that may be associated with that cycling facility. The other opportunity and through maintenance, and this is really a resurfacing opportunity, and we participate with DVRPC and our Suburban Bike Lanes Working Group. When PennDOT announces certain resurfacing opportunities for roadways within the county, we are able to know that they're coming a little bit more in advance than it used to be, and then review a number of review those municipalities to see if they have any bicycle and mobility plans or any sort of plans towards providing for cycling or bicycling opportunities or facilities within their roadways. PennDOT local district actually has a line item for having engineering review of those things, because a lot of these things are really in plans or conceptual and they're not necessarily fleshed out by an engineer. District 6 will do that and review it from a safety perspective to see if it is feasible to include. And whenever the pavements is resurfaced, then they restripe the lines. They're able to simply, if everything passes safety muster, they're able to add those facilities with those resurfacing opportunities. So that is something that we're also, working with our planning partners to advance within the county. Getting into the exceptions, again, this is something where, there are areas where not all modes of transportation are going to be appropriate. We are going to make it right into this policy so that it is, a reasonable, you have to meet a certain, a relatively high bar to exclude any modes of transportation. It can't just simply be because you don't think it's going to happen, or or just don't want it to happen. There should be fairly good reasons why certain modes would be not considered or applied to the redesign of the street. Cost of accommodations is somewhat is a reasonable factor. It has to be relatively let's say in the cost prohibitive category, and then other projects that aren't necessarily a redesign, but are something that had to be created in an emergency situation would be something that wouldn't necessarily be applicable to the policy. Relative to the other component, which is design standards, we prepared a multimodal circulation handbook. It's about 5 years old right now, which has a number of the existing design standards for bike lanes, shared roadways, sidewalks, crosswalks, and bus stops. We will be, referring to that initially and upgrading those, design references to the latest and greatest standards when we incorporate them into our policy. In addition to the multimodal handbook that we have in our municipal corner, we have a series of landscapes design guides. Most recently published one was our suburban center, and there's also an urban center design guide, which shows not only it doesn't necessarily provide for the detailed standard reference, but it shows how these different types of facilities can work in concert with each other and improve the pedestrian level environment in which they're located. I'm going to post into the chat a link to where you may be able to get these. Well, I will do it after I get out of the presentation. I'm unable to do it at this moment, but these guides can be found on our website. Here's just some examples again from the suburban and urban centers. And here you see, a combination of bike lanes, crosswalks, ADA accessibility, bike storage and bicycle racks, and how they can all work in concert to create this vision for a more active transportation environment. Here's yet another image. Finally, there'll be performance measures. A number of these things we already measure as part of Landscapes 3. We measure the mileage of existing bicycle lanes. We are working to improve our transit connections within the county with a bus stops initiative. We're looking to provide for bus shelters for all bus stops that have greater than 5 boardings. We're certainly looking to get an increase in the mileage of sidewalks, which we already measure. And there was recently a sidewalk inventory prepared by DVRPC that we have assisted in providing information for, and we actually use that information to help us, track where new sidewalks will be developed. Another performance measure will be mode shift. Now, mode shift from SOV, that's single occupancy vehicle. This is data we can get from the US Census, which will illustrate, what percentage of people use these different modes. The most dominant mode is obviously a single occupancy vehicle, but there are other modes that are available are walking, cycling, and the use of public transit. If we can see increases in any of those active transportation elements, then that is moving the needle in the right direction. And obviously the last performance measure is, how many members or what number of municipalities that we have within the county will be adopting this policy. So far as next steps in implementation are concerned, our next steps are to complete the draft policy. What we've shown here tonight is some of our initial goals and the vision. We will be flushing out the more detailed policy for review by our stakeholder committee, which will be meeting later this month. After we receive feedback from the stakeholder committee, we will be developing a final draft of our complete streets policy that we will present for review and approval and adoption by the Planning Commission board in September. And then from that point, we will look to amend Landscapes 3, via resolution with the Board of Commissioners for the county's comprehensive plan. And then we will also, promote this policy for adoption by municipalities. How we would go about doing this is most of the implementation of these policies is done by resolution. So we will prepare a sample resolution relative to the policy that municipalities may use for adoption of that policy. As Brian O'Leary mentioned at the beginning here, we also be promoting the results of our active transportation inventory, which was a 2-year project that we wrapped up last December. This is the countywide summary document that you see here, for which I will also provide a link in the chat once I get out of here, which has a summary of the findings and recommendations from that 2-year inventory. What Planning Commission staff had done was review the subdivision and land every municipality, all 73 municipalities will review their comprehensive plan, subdivision, land development ordinances, and zoning ordinances, as well as any active transportation related planning documents such as bicycle and pedestrian mobility plans and/or trail plans. We also collected any proposed trail alignments they may have in GIS, and are working towards providing another product coming out of that inventory, which is a countywide interactive trails map. At the completion of that project, we prepared reports for each of the municipalities, which provided what percentage of landscapes they fall into, our comments on the review of those documents, as well as our recommendations for how they may be able to improve their ordinance, their planning documents and ordinance structure, so that many of these facilities can be developed through the land development process, as opposed to municipalities seeking out grant funding for individual projects. The land development process is by far the most efficient and cost-effective way to have a number of these facilities implemented within your communities, and will provide for the most continuity, so to speak, of that network. Just touching back upon our schedule before we wrap up here. Again, we have our meeting this evening. We were going to, take any input and the questions that we receive here tonight, and work on completing our draft policy that we will share with our stakeholders meeting at the end of this month, or perhaps early August, and then pull together our final draft policy by the end of August, so that we may present it and have our Planning Commission board approve it in September. So thank you all for attending this evening. There will be a Q&A this session. I just wanted to put up our contact information if you should have any questions or comments that you'd like to share with us beyond this meeting. So far as feel free to send either one of us an email or give us a call. And then also the link to the Planning Commission website is at the bottom. So again, thank you all for attending, and we'll move now into the Q&A. All right. So Eric, do we have any more questions?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Well, first of all, there was a comment, a countywide trail guide would be so nice. And that I agree. And that is actually something that we are in the process of working on. But it's a process of going through every municipality and picking out all of their trails, and then bringing it all into one layer, so to speak. So we're working on it, and when we have something that is accurate, we'll be ready to publish.
Yep. And we've been working on that in an online map format. So you would be able to click on a link on our website, and it'll take you to an interactive map that you'll be able to zoom in and out, change the different base maps if you want an aerial or just a standard map beneath it. And also look at, potential, there will be some other options relative to what you may want to investigate or see on that map. So that is something that will be a product of, again, of our active transportation inventory. And it's really, as Eric alluded to, is processing quite a bit of information and making it all match up. So that's the big challenge. So thank you.
Commissioner Moskowitz asked if we'll be able to utilize the map on our phones. That has definitely been discussed, and that's the overall the big goal, the long-term goal. Is to definitely have some sort of an app that can be used on cell phones. Melody Wires, and I apologize if I butchered your last name. How would this be funded?
The policy?
Well, it just says, how would this be funded? So it's not, so since it's, the county is working on the policy right now. It's not necessarily working on the procedure.
We received as Eric alluded to in the early part of the grant, we received a $5,000 grant from PADCNR, and we're working with the PA Walkworks and Health Department. And I believe Carol Reichbaum, who is our contact there, is or was on the meeting here earlier. But I mean, I think it's really part of our work program in the Planning Commission. I mean, I think so. The money helps us to develop the policy, but this is really going to be through our normal course of action, where we promote this policy to our municipalities. We, as the Planning Commission, is an advisory group. Everything that we do is advisory relative to our municipalities, so that we can improve the quality of life and the built environment in the county. And that's really what we're looking to do. And this is no exception.
All right.
I am going to post I just posted the link to the planning guides, which you can look at both the urban center and suburban center landscapes guides, as well as the multimodal handbook. This is basically the page from which you will be able to access any one of those guides within our municipal corner. And then I'll provide one more link here, which will take you to our active transportation inventory website, where you'll be able to review and download the countywide summary document for that. For the individual municipal reports, we just share them individually with the municipalities because they are custom for each one of them, and it's really, best distributed that way. And we will be resending those whenever we wrap up this policy and looking to promote adoption.
I don't see any other questions, Brian. There was one comment again about the limited access highways as far as when rehabilitation or maintenance happens, there could be bridges or culverts or tunnels included. We don't really have any, nothing like that has happened recently, but I will give kudos to PennDOT for putting in the multi-use trail across the 422 bridge, which is helping to connect the Schuylkill River Trail ultimately from Philadelphia to Reading.
Yep, that's great.
All right.
All
I
right.
don't see any other questions.
Yeah,
And
Mark,
it
we have recorded this, and we will post a link to this recorded session for you to take a look at. And I believe you're also on our Stakeholder Group committee, so we will definitely share the presentation. So,
Paula, you have your hand up?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, I was wondering, does the Planning Commission ever discourage overdevelopment? Because it seems like to me that most of the problems are happening because of overdevelopment. I mean,
it's kind
I
of
know
a
where
loaded
I
question.
live.
I mean, I think it
When I live
depends
in-
on the
I live in
location of where that is, and
live
whether
in
or not
Berw-
there's a capacity to handle it.
I live in Berwyn, and Berwyn is getting just so overdeveloped, it's ridiculous. So does the County Planning Commission ever discuss that with the so-called stakeholders?
We review land developments as part of our 247 group. If we're asked from the municipalities, and we provide through our 247 or land development review group specific comments on certain developments as we were requested to. I think there is some advantage to providing more density within certain locations. And I've worked in Berwyn for 10 years, so I'm very familiar with that area. It's not overly dense, but it is seeing some increase in density. There are some advantages from tax perspectives and everything else of increasing density, because you don't have to develop additional new infrastructure, or let's just say suburban sprawl, and therefore you have a certain level of efficiency by increasing that density. But there are also other things that are reviewed relative to traffic impact statements that are prepared by developers. And generally speaking, if the municipalities are you in Tredyffrin or Easttown? Easttown, I assume?
Easttown.
Yeah.
And as far as infrastructure goes, they're going crazy. I mean, you can't go to any road where they aren't digging up the road and putting new lines, pipes, for the sewer and water and all of that sort of stuff. So infrastructure is having to be unbelievably upgraded just to accommodate all of the development.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, the quality of life is really going down. So just, it would be nice if somebody that has some influence would back off some of this development.
Well, I understand your concerns and thank you for your comments. I think that, that we, again, we're advisory, we offer
Right.
our comments, but I think it's really something that you would get probably better addressed that it's your local municipality who does have the, ability to review and approve and or deny those developments. So.
Mhm.
So Brian, going back to funding, Kevin Myers had brought up a great example of the collaboration, the public-private collaboration between at Main Street, Exton, with the new multi-use trail between, Main Street and the Amtrak station. So that is definitely a good example. All right, well, we're about 3 minutes till 8. Do we have any other questions or comments that anyone would like to bring up? If not, we sure do appreciate your time today coming out. Nice warm summer night, and here you are stuck on Zoom. So, but thanks so much for joining
Thanks
us.
everybody for coming out this evening. We really appreciate your time. And if you should have any questions or comments or input that you'd like to offer us, feel free to contact us. I believe you should be able to find our contact info through the website. And if not, you can certainly give us a call. So thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you,
again for
Brian and
attending.
Eric. Great presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
Thanks. Good night, folks.
All right.